What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome in, everybody. This is The Q. I am your host, Belligerent, and this is episode 1 of our brand new podcast. So, again, let me say welcome, and we're just using episode 1 to kind of talk about the podcast, what to expect from the podcast, why am I doing this podcast, to test things out, make sure I got everything working right, because since the last time I did a podcast, my setup has changed a little bit. So I just want to, take the opportunity to use episode 1 as kind of a test episode. So future episodes will be a little more structured, have a little bit better content. This episode's going to be kind of me rambling a little bit, kind of getting you used to me, hoping to get you to come back. So let's get into it. Okay, so why the new podcast? Some of you, in fact, let's be honest, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know me in some fashion or form. Some of you, probably very few of you, may have been following me since the days of the Gamer DNA podcast I did a while back. Had my partner, Truth and Cliche, on there, but we only did 3 episodes. The reason we did a little more than 3 episodes, but never got the other ones published. The reason for that was because I got the gig as coach of Gangstars, and I needed to give all of my focus and attention to that new job, to that organization, and it paid off. It was a great experience. First time I got to go out of the country, got to go out to London, participate in the live event, meet some of the great players of our game, got to work with them, Iraqi, Zeno, Wrecked, all amazing guys. And so I had to set the podcast aside and never really came back to it. And then after Gangstars, started coaching Nova, still currently coaching Nova at the time of recording this podcast. I don't know how long in the future you might be listening to this, so I may or may not still be with Nova. Who knows what the future has. And so that podcast. I don't know what a podcast is, but that podcast got set aside for these other projects that I've been working on. Since then, I've started co-hosting with Endless and Crude Sloth over on Time for Rolling Esports podcast. I plan to continue being part of that podcast, assuming that they want to keep me around. That podcast is great. Focuses on esports and the VG8 scene, primarily EU and NA regions, predictions, recaps. Being part of that podcast really brought back the desire to podcast, to talk. Let's face the facts. I have a lot of opinions. Most of them are probably absurd, probably wrong. I have a lot of inane ideas and insights, things like that. And I just like to talk. So I wanted to start up my own podcast again and just talk about whatever was on my mind, not necessarily have to be guided by one specific thing or the other. And that's kind of where the name came from. Originally, I was going to give this podcast maybe some catchy name that kind of tied into Vainglory. And that's what most of this podcast is going to be about. That's the community that I'm active in. Like I said, I coach. I have coached or am coaching different organizations at the pro level in that game. But then I thought, well, I want to create a project that is going to last. And gaming is really where my heart is. I don't know if the Vainglory scene is going to last. I don't know if my involvement in the esports scene as a coach or in some other fashion or form is going to continue on. Somewhere down the road, I may just become a podcaster about video games. I don't know. So I didn't want to use some catchy name like Time for Rolling. Time for Rolling comes from the hero Lance in the game, and there's other, like I've been interviewed on Shatter the Vein, which is another great podcast. but that is specifically about vainglory. And with a name like Shatter the Vein, talking about the vein crystal, it would be difficult with a name like that to ever transition into a different topic, a different community, or just branch out. So I didn't want to tie myself into, even though vainglory will be the primary content of our podcast, I didn't want to tie myself into that because frankly there's other games out there, and I see some of vainglory's kind of celebrities or top players or biggest names or whatever experimenting or branching out or doing whatever, picking up games like PUBG or Fortnite or Overwatch or all of these great games that are coming out. Some of my favorite vainglory streamers have started picking up other games like Destiny 2 and things like that. And I don't have a lot of time, so I don't get into a lot of other games, especially with as much of my free time that is tied up with vainglory, with being a coach, with casting. I do casting for NACL and for CSL, with doing the Time for Rolling podcast. I don't have a lot of free time to really delve into other video games, but at some point I might. At some point I might want to. At some point and let's hope not, but at some point the vainglory scene might die. So I wanted to leave myself room to branch out or to talk about other things, to not feel necessarily tied in. If I come home one day and what I feel like talking about on this podcast is Overwatch or hell, even the new mobile game that I just downloaded last night, as a matter of fact, Lineage 2, this new game that's going to be the first, let's see if I can get this right, MMORPG game on mobile. Maybe I want to talk about that, or maybe I want to talk about Clash Royale or whatever. I just wanted I wanted to leave myself some room. The name The Queue, a lot of competitive games, whether it's a game like Vainglory, whether it's a game like, I don't know, what other games have I played that have queues? Gears of War, when you play in the competitive matches there. So I just thought the name, the queue, kind of fit. Originally, I was going to call it the solo queue because a lot of it will be just me by myself, and I know that can be a dangerous prospect in podcasting because it's very difficult to carry a whole show solo. So that's why you see a lot of shows, and some of the most successful shows always have co-hosts. So I was originally going to go with solo queue because I was going to take this concept and I was just going to kind of do it myself because I talk a lot and I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas and opinions, and a lot of those people are going to disagree with. Some of them people will agree with. But I was going to take this project on solo, and a lot of these episodes on this podcast will be me solo. Just kind of my schedule and the time frame and the way that I want to put these together. I don't want to necessarily be tied into when another person is available or tied into another person's schedule or something like that. Always trying to find that time. I want to be able to sit down, record a podcast, maybe record several podcasts, and just get them out there. And I want to, this podcast I'm going to try and do it daily, so you can expect a new episode every day to drop. That's the goal right now. And so that's why I'm approaching this solo, but then I changed my mind and decided to go with just the queue as opposed to the solo queue, because that also leaves me flexibility, right? There may be an episode here or there where I bring in a co-host. I've talked to other people about co-hosting podcasts with me, and like I said, I'm a co-host on the Time for Rolling show and things of that nature. So there may be episodes here or there sprinkled out where we duo queue or trio queue. Who knows? It leaves more flexibility for the future of the podcast if I didn't if I was careful about where I was going with the podcast and the name that I chose for the podcast and things of that nature. So that's kind of why the name and why the new podcast. So what can you expect from this podcast is probably the other thing that you want to know when listening to me ramble on about this episode and about what I might be talking about in these podcasts. And so I've already touched on it a little bit. Most of the content, most of the episodes will be about vainglory because that's where my heart is and that's where my interest is and that's frankly where most of my knowledge is. And anything else that I decide to talk about, whether I talk about some other games that I dabble in, Hearthstone, or like I'm really going to give this new game Lineage 2 a chance and see how that goes. And I might want to talk about some of those things, but my knowledge in those is going to be a lot less than what it is in Vainglory, because Vainglory is what I follow. It's what I'm tied into. In a way, it's kind of my job, being a coach and things of that nature. So a lot of it's going to be Vainglory, but we won't always be strictly Vainglory. Some might be half and half. I might touch on Vainglory for one half of the show and then go back to, just kind of reviewing another game or something like that. So, but it's always going to be about gaming. It's not always going to be about esports, and it's not always going to be about esports. We will talk about the VG8 and the Worlds events and Challenger battles and things like that in as the seasons move on, and kind of recap. But it's not going to be as in-depth esports look as Time for Rolling is. That's why I do the Time for Rolling show. That's why that show is around, because they delve into the esports really deep. There are going to be times where we talk about, 5v5. That's what's on everybody's mind. Or review the new hero, or talk about update notes, or maybe get into some of the minutia of the game, or talk about things we want to see from the game. Not that SEMC is ever going to listen to this podcast and take our advice, but maybe we'll throw some of that out there. And we're going to have ways for you guys to get involved: social media, Twitter, email. I want you guys to talk to me. I want you guys to let me know what's going on. I want you guys to ask me questions. Tell me what you want to hear, and we'll talk about it. And like I said, you're not always going to agree with me. I'm not always going to agree with you, but that's why I enjoy these things. And, I wish that I had the time and the setup for like a live show that people could call into and interact with me on, but that it just can't be that way. But if you want to interact, I want you to interact, and we're going to set up a hashtag for the show, and I will give out the email for the show, so you can write to me, you can tweet to me, ask questions, give me topics you want to hear, or cuss me out and tell me how bad my last episode was. So that's really what you can expect from this new podcast, from the Q. Like I said, we're gonna try and drop an episode every single day. So that's the goal of this right now is a daily podcast. Um, because I want consistency. I want you to know that you can hear this show every day. I want it to be routine for you. I don't want you kind of following along and wondering when the next episode is going to be or anything like that. And you know, 7 days a week, 7 episodes a week is a big commitment, but it's something that I'm really going to commit to. But I do have a real life that I have to tend to. I do have a full-time job. I am a parent. So things might happen, but I have a plan and I have a goal, and I'm going to try and stay ahead of everything, and I'm going to try and keep episodes coming on a daily basis. So please, if you like this podcast, if you're interested in it, if you want to get involved, please do so. Hit us up on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow me personally on Twitter at belligerent_VG. That's spelled BLG3RNT_VG. We will have a show Twitter as well. I haven't decided on that, so I'm not giving it to you right now. But follow me on Twitter. Look out for more information. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. All of these episodes will be released on YouTube and iTunes. So subscribe to those. It's really free for you to subscribe. All you gotta do is click that little red button that says subscribe, and we'll get you set up. So this is going to conclude episode 1, our introduction episode to the Q. I am super excited for this project. I hope you are too. I hope you want to be a part of this. But if nothing else, I just get to listen to myself talk, and that's why I enjoy podcasting, is because I enjoy talking. I enjoy sharing my thoughts and my opinions, and I'm a very opinionated person, and sometimes my interactions with other people can be a little too strong and off-putting for them. So that's why I like to talk to myself. So maybe you are going to enjoy listening to me talk to myself or whatever. But again, I hope that you will choose to get involved, respond on Twitter, listen on a daily. So thanks for listening. I am Belligerent. This was the Q. Have a good one.